afternoon, our dear esteemed viewers. Tonight we're discussing the significance of the International Youth Day and the green skills for youth. You realize that on 12th of August of this month, we celebrated International Youth Day. But it still runs across and we are still celebrating it since August is mostly dedicated to the young people of Uganda, to the young people of the world. So joining me to discuss tonight's interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help, as you can see, they're giving a very bright smile to show that they're actually distinguished. So I'm very happy to host them today and have them discuss tonight's conversation. My name is Douglas Drake, and I'm your host or moderator for tonight's show. I'm just going to briefly, today I want to introduce them because, as you see, they're all excited and they're all shining bright. So they'll definitely introduce themselves and let you know who they are. I'll begin right to my right. Gentlemen, introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. My name is Rugumayo. I'm a student at Victoria University, pursuing a master's in diplomacy and global studies. I'm vice president of the East African Students Union, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. We're definitely most happy and humbled to have you here, Roy Rugumayo. Very intelligent young man, and thanks for the works you have done with UNSA and the works you're still doing for the students of East Africa. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Right next to Mr. Roy Rugumayo, a lady who has been giving, who has been smiling. Kindly introduce yourself.
Oh, wow.
The audience would like to, get to know you.
Thank you, Drake. Good evening to you all. My name is Irene Nakamatte. I'm a student pursuing my Bachelor of Laws at UCU. And I'll be joining my third year in September.
Okay, yeah. Exciting, exciting. Definitely, we're looking forward to hearing from you and having an interesting conversation.
Same here.
Last but not least, the Pan-Africanist, the gentleman who has appeared on the show a couple of times. And as you know, when he's on the show, definitely you'd expect interesting conversations. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Drake. My name is Phillip Muliisa. I'm a Ugandan, but an African.
Okay.
So, a very proud African. I never forget to say that. A very proud African, a journalist by training. And I'm so happy to be on this show.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. We're very happy to have you, Ugandan, proud African, to discuss with us tonight's conversation. But I'm going to start with you, Roy. You understand on this panel you are the senior in terms of student leadership and leadership as a whole.
True.
And talking about International Youth Day, definitely it's an aspect that leadership will come in here and there. But this year's theme has been focusing on green skills. But since we're discussing the significance of this International Youth Day, I just wanted to briefly give us a history of International Youth Day and maybe tell us what exactly the theme of this year was about.
Well, thank you so much. Historically, we've had groups that have been marginalized for various reasons, and that marginalization led to exclusion from various resources and opportunities, including women, people of color, and the youth, incidentally, and even unfortunately, are along those lines of groups that have for long been left out of the opportunity loop. So this day was established to try and put forward issues in line with bringing the young people back into what my colleague would call the cash economy, or back into the opportunity loop, back into the midst of conversations regarding their inclusion.
Yeah.
So this particular day is meant to take stock of the strides made towards having the young people very much involved.
Yeah.
I've attended very many platforms where I always say that the conversation on what the youth can do is quite dismissive, but rather it should be the conversation of what youth have done or continue to do.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the statistics of who serves in military, other than the top command, most of the people in, most of the soldiers in DR Congo, in the Central African Republic. And so when you look at our servicemen and servicewomen, many of whom are youths, they're doing quite tremendously in keeping peace and establishing peace all over the continent and in the country, corner to corner. When you look at our health sector, the doctors, the nurses, the biggest margin are young people, are interns, save for a few specialists. So the young people are actually the cornerstone of the health sector. The young people are the cornerstone of our country's mobility when you look at the border sector. These are all young people. So they are making a magnanimous contribution towards the socio-economic transformation.
True.
So every August of every year, we take stock of those contributions. We appreciate for those contributions, but we also discuss how better we can help them make a meaningful and more impactful contribution towards society's progress. Last year, it was about an intergenerational solidarity, because you realize very many of these issues that humanity has to tackle are faced by all people.
Yeah.
But then we're reaching a moment where ageism was coming in, and the young people were saying, you know, these old people are eating into our space. Why don't they retire and all that? And the old people are saying, what's wrong with this young generation? They are lazy. They don't want to work. So last year's theme was rebuilding that cross-generational solidarity, that you are this, we are advantaged with time and youthful energies. Some are advantaged with experience and the wisdom that comes with the gray hair. And others are advantaged in various ways. So let's come together, build solidarity to make society better. Now, this year's theme comes at a backdrop of so much happenings regarding humanity's sustainability in climate. I mean, you know the amount of plastic pollution that is happening. You know the amount of environmental degradation that is happening. So much is happening. So this year we're thinking the young people are going to be the most affected at the long run by all these unsustainable ways of living. So how do we change their attitudes? How do we change their ways of life? How do we change their value systems so that we live more sustainably, we live more better lives for ourselves, but also for generations to come? So that's basically this year's theme, in line with the
Thank you.
International Youth Day.
Yeah, thank you. That has been a very comprehensive historical context, but also you bring or you highlight a very detailed purpose of why we celebrate International Youth Day. It is a day that is meant to bring forth the voices of numerous young people across the globe, to channel their energies, to channel their voices into one, but also push a cause that is quite runs across the whole continent, of which this year's theme was focusing on green skills for youth, which is looking at sustainable future. Allow me get to you, Ms. Irene. From where my brother Roy ends the conversation, or how it opens for us tonight's conversation, puts for us into perspective why we need this day. Now, my question to you is, how can celebrating International Youth Day continue to, raise awareness about challenges faced by young people globally?
Okay, thank you very much, Drake. Like Roy said, I love the fact that last year's theme was bridging the gap between the youth and the elderly.
Yeah.
We had reached, I don't know whether you guys recognize this trend, whereby in our A level there was a lot of the thing of generational gap. But I love the fact that while UN is doing these trends, it pays attention to the systematic changes. So right now we are I think we're getting past the era of I'm doing this for my dad, or I'm pursuing a bachelor's in law for my dad, or I'm going to get into engineering for my dad. And all this, the entire International Youth Day theme is opening our eyes to new opportunities and new things that are coming up. You realize that I was actually doing research on the green jobs, and you realize there is an environmental technician. And you're like, okay, oh my God. You know, it has an engineering touch to it, but now you're paying attention to how am I going to build a better country, a better globe for my children to come. I keep on telling my friends that sometimes the things we do, we should stop doing probably for my mom, my dad, which is not bad, yes. But now you're looking at breeding something for generation tomorrow.
Posterity.
And I love the fact that that's what UN is actually bringing up. And you realize that if we continue destroying what we have now, then those to come won't have anything at any point. Like, we should just change the trend. You realize that when you probably tweet about something or policy making, someone will be like, those things stop in the parliament and what. But my father often tells me, you're the change you want to see. If you want to see something happen, go ahead in the world and actually do it. So what do? Invest in yourself. Find something new to learn every day and actually take time off to educate yourself about it, get to fall in love with it, so that by the time someone else is going to come and take it up from you, you've actually built a legacy. So it is important that we celebrate International Youth Day because it was commemorated, was it 1999? I think it was 24 years of policymakers creating a change that by the time they leave, they're leaving something for us to start with. And I don't think it would be a good thing to destroy what is there. You wouldn't want what you have now to stop with you because you're enjoying, there's that feel it comes with. When I was researching about green skills, I fell more in love. I'm like, oh my God, this is really interesting, you get. And it is actually, was it last week I was doing something to do with fintech and their green bonds. I didn't really understand the entire, because they were trying to explain the impact of fintech to the environment. And now they're actually creating cards that are not, won't affect the ecosystem.
Biodegradable.
They are biodegradable, and you realize that now they're paying attention to those things more, that they're like, okay, right now there is global warming, the carbon levels are rising, sea levels are rising. Last time we were in Parliament, and one of the speakers was speaking about the fact that they are not sure by the time they go to the waistline whether they are about to be cut off Uganda. And all this we need to pay attention to and actually have solutions for as young minds. I love the fact that he said, yes, it's okay, we need the generation that is there right now because we need their wisdom. But then we need our young minds because they are fresh and
energetic
innovative
and
and they are, you always, you know, when you're teaching a child something, they have that spark in them to actually learn. So I think that's what we are right now. And it's a beautiful thing, I would say.
Right. Thank you. Be the change you want to be. Phillip Muliisa, the Pan-Africanist. I want us to go into that angle of, I've had this argument. I have two questions for you. I want to get your insight on that Pan-African argument you usually make. Someone told me that, you see, Drake, we usually celebrate International Youth Day on various themes. And these themes are determined by our colonizers, imperialists. And you realize that the challenges of Ugandans, the Ugandan youth is different from the challenges of a Tanzanian youth, is different from the challenges of a South African youth, is different from the challenges of a Moroccan youth, it's different from the challenges of the youth in America, and it's different from the challenges of a youth in the United Kingdom. What do you have to say about the codification of these themes? Do you think we need to have a more diverse way of having each country maybe coming up with its theme or something? Handle that. But then too, how can governments, NGOs and communities collaborate to make International Youth Day more impactful?
Thank you, Drake. To begin with, I think humanity has common challenges.
Yeah.
Things to do with hunger, things to do with employment, things to do with healthcare, education, etc.
Yeah.
These are common challenges, whether you're in China, whether you're in the UK, the United States, or wherever. And when you go back, when I imagine the spirit of the International Council of Ministers that sat in Lisbon, 98, Portugal, to come up with a recommendation to really have this day celebrated until it was passed as a resolution by the UN. They must have realized that young people world over have something in common other than the challenges. They have the energy. It is them that steer the innovation and the transformation we see in the world. Therefore, choosing to let the international bodies such as the UN and so on decide what you call the imperialistic approach to setting themes and so on. They could have based on the fact that the challenges are the same. There is unemployment in China, there is unemployment in the US, there is unemployment in Uganda. And young people are the key victims of this.
Yeah.
So it is really not a very big challenge to have a theme from the United Nations. The challenge would be that we choose to dance to the theme other than make it practical in terms of realizing the key tenets of what has to be a part of the life of young people. A few days ago, I attended an event, the Kampala SDG Festival. And when you look through the 17 SDGs, they are all things that youth are going through today. Whether you're an African youth, whether you're a European or Asian youth. What happens is that the way we look at these things in the different lenses we use as young people, then go to the elderly, go to the people in authority. It is what determines what young people do in the world.
Yeah.
If you choose to fight poverty, SDG number 1, who are the poor people?
The young people. Majority.
So you must involve young people.
Definitely.
It has to be about young people. Throughout history, there is no shortage of examples that show how young people have been the cornerstone for the transformations across the world. If I refer to recent history, you could talk about maybe the great Cultural Revolution of China, 66, the formation of the Red Army. These were young people. When you come to the independence of African nations, these were all young people steering this transformation and progress. So looking into all this, the Youth Day and how the African must look at it, the key point should be, what are these young people on the African continent exactly doing? What are we focusing on? Are we really interested in the transformation? Or we spend most of our time on telenovelas and Hollywood and football, and yes, these are good things, but how are we involved? Are we just consumers, or we are participating in those particular things?
Yeah. Which now brings us to the second part of the question, maybe briefly as you answer it. How can governments, NGOs, and communities, collaborate to make the International Youth Day more impactful?
Yes. A few months ago, we had the youth wing of the China Communist Party meeting. to discuss how China should look like 100 years from 2023. I do not know the position of the National Youth Council of Uganda in regards to Africa Vision 2063, and that is just 40 years away.
Mm.
I do not know the vision of NYC on Uganda Vision 2040. I do not know whether they have a statement on that. These are the points, these are the issues. What are we focusing on? The discussions we have is find young, if it's not football, then we are discussing tobacco main generator, things of the sort.
True.
But is that what is going to bring transformation to the young person of Africa?
All right. Thank you. You bring a very interesting and a lens to the conversation that is quite informed and makes the conversation look, quite ideal. But the reality of our country today is the fact that we have, should I say, a body of leadership that makes us focus on semantics of issues rather than the critical issues of the matter. Which makes me invite my brother Roy. You're a leader yourself, student leader. And
This is where I feel back in.
And oftentimes you realize, even in student leadership or outside leadership, we only wake up. People have been complaining that the NYC hasn't been active until they chopped off their budget. And
I agree.
they will have the argument. And, they'll say, we have been working, but we've not been, putting it out there, or you've just not been following. We came out because the budgets have been cut and we can justify what we've been doing with the money, and they have the justification to that. But we'll get to that. I know you're itching to respond, but tonight I'm not looking at that. I'm just trying to bring in my brother Roy. In your submission, you realize we're talking about this year's theme, green skilling. So my next line of question is going to be on environmental challenges and green skills. As a leader, we oftentimes focus on semantics of issues instead of the critical issue. But as we discuss the significance of International Youth Day, environmental challenges and green skills, my question to you, as you highlight the most pressing environmental challenges that today's youth are facing, possibly also tell us how best we can combat this realistically, instead of just focusing on semantics, but looking at critical issues and how we can solve them.
Thank you so much. The issue of the youth and generally how we interact with the various issues is a product of deliberate conscientization of the masses, of the people. This comes from mass education, from mass tuning of a national direction or global direction towards a particular agreed upon position. Now, we might be discussing symptoms by talking about cutting down trees, by talking about the plastics in the oceans and the lakes, the draining of the swamp for sand and all that. These are simply symptoms of a bigger challenge, which has to do with our ways of life. When you talk about sustainable living, you are talking about minimalist living. You are talking about how can I stay alive, healthy, productive. It is saying, let's cut the slack. Let's reduce. Let's live life with what we can't inevitably live without. Okay? When you enter your house, there are so many things that you can live without, but still live comfortably. Okay? But for them to be made, I mean, they are there simply for your luxury and for you to feel good that there is a huge cupboard there. And for that cupboard to be made, they had to chop trees.
Yes.
Okay? For the carpet to be made, the woolen carpet, they had to destroy something because to make that carpet, and yet you could live without it. Okay? For the very huge refrigerator to be made, something had to be mined from the forests of Congo to make it. So something had to be destroyed because energy cannot be created. Okay? It can only be transferred from one form to another. So for me to live a kind of luxurious life with things that I do not even need, okay, with 7 cars in my parking that I do not even need, okay, I have to fuel them. And for fuel to be got, Total has to mine something, okay? And for the car parts to be made, something has to be destroyed because energy cannot be created. It can only be transformed from one form to another. Okay? So how then do we go into tackling that? It has so much to do with our ways of life, that primitive accumulation is, we live in a society where primitive accumulation is glorified, where having the biggest house is what is considered to be prestigious on the village. What do you need a big house for? Take for instance, what do you need a big bed for? Like a bed that covers an entire room. You will still sleep in one corner.
True.
You'll still sleep in one corner. But for us to make that big bed, for your own feel good, for your own optics and luxury, right? Trees had to be cut. Okay? So this kind of life that is characterized with accumulation, that is characterized with pomp, that is characterized with distraction. You have to go to a band, do all this expenditure, and do all this, then drive home in a Subaru that is a fuel guzzler. That is considered success. So until we find a new definition of success that is based on character, that is based on content, that is based on values. How much do you know? How much can you conserve? How minimally can you live? And that is the new form of glorification. Okay? Then we shall not be conserving anything. Okay? Because we are destroying the oceans, okay, mining sand from the oceans and from the swamps, just so someone can have a huge mansion, which they don't need. I mean, you sleep in one room, on one bed, on a very small side of the bed. And the other day I was discussing with my friend about our burial and its sustainability.
Yes.
I mean, people make a very huge cemented something, but concrete. What?
Then
so we
iron and
yes, in 50 years from now, of course, as we bury like that, I mean, we are taking off pieces of land, okay, which we may never use again, okay. Now, 50 years from now, many people are dying, of course. Much more people are dying. Many are getting born and all that. We shall not have anywhere to farm. Everywhere we shall have one huge graveyard called Uganda. But then, how important is it that someone who has died has to be buried in concrete and all that? It's all pomp. It's all, we cannot bury our grandfather in soil. But he has died. And he's going to rot. So I was telling that friend that if I get into parliament, or when I get into parliament, we have to bring legislation that bars people from burying like that.
I think that is going to raise a lot of controversy.
Of course, he told me that he told me that is going to be your first and last term because everyone wants to be buried in pomp. But then it's not sustainable. And in
I think I will second that motion.
in greening and having those green skills, it has so much to do with what we attach value to, what our characters are to. I mean, we go into a restaurant, Cafe Javas, and get so many plastics. They bring your caramel in a plastic. They bring your chicken in something. Like, what for? Even if they brought it in a paper bag, it would still taste the same. They bring a very huge straw. To me, our way of life and what we have chosen to attach value to is not sustainable. And going into green skills, into a green way of living has so much to do with what we want, what we attract, what we feel is accomplishing to us. Yes.
Thank you. From your submission, you paint a picture of what exactly green skills are. You realize that green skills is not the green skills we think it is. Green skills is the knowledge. Green skills is the ability. Green skills is the competence to actually see that we have a sustainable way of protecting our environment. It's simply eco-friendly ways of living with the environment. So it cuts across industrialization, it cuts across our way of life, it cuts across. So that picture that you paint makes it clear.
Because all those industries are built to feed into what we consider to be accomplishment.
So thank you. And now I just push the question to my dear there. When I talk about environmental challenges and green skills, this year the theme was on green skills for youth. So what are the most pressing environmental challenges that today's young people are facing, from maybe crops dying, etc. Maybe you can put it in a submission and we get it out.
I had a chance to attend a few meetings while I was interning, and if we're going to call it, I don't know, I'm lacking a word to use. When I was in a meeting, Aqua CP has the glass bottle for water. I found it interesting. I was like, okay. And you realize those are easier to reuse. You just take, wash, and they won't have, unless it's broken and disposed of poorly. It's when it's going to cause an impact on the environment. The first issue, the first problem I'll identify with, first of all, within my circles, and also people around, the people I've seen, is we have poor disposal habits.
Waste management.
Like, very terrible. Like, it beats my mind. There's a friend of mine, we're in class, touch of class juice, the plastic glass. She just threw it there. I'm like, why are you throwing that there? It's like, we pay cleaners to do this for us. And it disturbed my mind. So I picked it up and took it to the trash can. That's you need to first teach yourself how to do these things. That, I need proper waste management skills.
So ignorance is a challenge.
It is a very big challenge. We keep on speaking climate change, SDG festival, what. But we do not have these values in us. As you know, green skills is having the knowledge and actually having the value to actually go ahead and do it. So that's the first issue I'm going to identify. Poor waste management skills. I had another chance to attend Jenga Haki Festival, and the question was on how to curb land problems. And all these teams had the same thing of boundaries and how to, track your land and all. So here comes a team called Recycle Pay. Yes. These guys are coming up with a way to help someone save their land to
Waste
management. The person just comes and drops, so it becomes eventually a dumping site. And then now what they are saying is that get that garbage of yours, give it to us, recycle it, we give you currency points, and these points you will use for education and health. You realize they're tackling actually SDGs. They are building sustainable cities, they are tackling on health issues, and they're also tackling the issue of illiteracy.
And
poverty.
And the land challenge of nuisance.
You understand? So we need such cohorts. You understand? The fact that these spaces are actually there. And we see that with green skills coming onto the map, there are new jobs being created. So I was reading a paper and they were saying when it comes to International Youth Day and its commemoration and its impact, it's not only for the youth, but also for the policymakers and the various well-wishers we have out there. You realize that if you want to push an agenda, you may have the innovation in your mind. You may have the creation and all, but you may not have the economic stand to push you there. That's where another hand comes in. That's why we have various partners and those people who carry the same agenda as us. So my first issue is we are so ignorant and we don't care enough. Like the way Phillips was saying that we're spending a lot of time on TikTok, scrolling and watching telenovelas and all. Yes, it is interesting. It's for leisure and all. But what if you could subscribe your TikTok to probably something else? You could probably subscribe to UN, subscribe your Twitter handle to UN, to NYC. He has an issue with NYC, which I also do have, but anyway. And you could learn, like, get your phone and Google up and, get to know these things. How do I actually build my country? The renewable energy, Onen talked about it while we were at Parliament. Renewable energy, wind power, that turbines and all. Egypt has a very good, I've forgotten that dam. We used to study about it alone. Yes. The energy, like it's just water conservation. At the same time, you're creating power. At the same time, you're creating renewable energy. At the same time, you're creating jobs. So get something new to learn, like educate yourself.
Have you seen the green city they built around that dam? My God.
Okay, thank you. Let me get to you, then we'll go for a break briefly. When you listen to Roy's submission about how it contextualizes what green skills are, to the submission of Irene of trying to show you the challenges that we face as young people, environmental challenge of ignorance, like it's a big thing that very many of our young people are facing up to date. You find someone, someone in their properly dressed, smelling nice, looking good, and dumping a plastic bottle along the road.
Nice.
Yeah. Now that is something that cuts across. Even our elders do the same, and you tell them that's wrong, and they say like, we have people who sweep the roads and do all that, but it's bad because you realize that a plastic takes approximately 400 years to decompose. Now imagine how many plastics are decomposed on the
But the question is, why are we using the plastics?
No, but
because we think they are easier.
No. The thing is,
it all goes back.
Your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's your comfort that you should own a very huge smart TV and a phone and yet shouldn't be disturbed when you buy a soda. It should be in a plastic bottle which you can take and throw on. It's
that's a controversial topic that I would really hold about plastic. But plastic is something that has somewhat become a way of life. But I think what we should then look at is how can we educate people to reuse these plastics instead of just disposing them into water bodies, onto the roadside, among others. But nonetheless, let me get to Philip. Philip, How can green skills, how can green skills and sustainable practices help address these challenges that we're facing?
Well, many of the things we have to do as a people is really realizing what is important for us vis-a-vis what we just want to be around. Just like Roy mentioned. One of the recommendations from COP26, the former one, the one in Glasgow, Scotland, was that the world and the people should reduce their intake of beef. And the reason they mentioned beef was that the more you take beef, then someone out there is going to try and rear more cattle, which calls for clearing, setting up land to take care of cattle, cutting down forests, and so on. So the cycle goes back to destroying the environment. I do not know how many.
I don't think I've made a full one.
So you realize it's a question of us realizing what is more important, getting out of our comfort zones and knowing that actually humanity is endangered, and that focusing on these green skills, it's the only way we shall survive.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I don't know, I was having a conversation with a friend who said, I don't care whether I'm dumping this or the other, I don't care, after everyone will die. And I'm like, what explanation will you give to your great-grandchild 100 years from today when they are being told you can no longer stay on Earth and the only option is going to Mars with Elon Musk?
Which is quite expensive. Which you're not sure that you'll afford.
With women robots.
Or underwater, and we know what happens underwater. We saw what happened to that submersible and so on. Meaning down there or up there, it is already not sustainable. We have a sustainable space and we are living extravagant land, not taking care of it, and we think, what are we going to tell our grandchildren? Or how will they perceive us? Or we say that Stone Age person was primitive and backward and so on. But this person preserved the earth for us. We celebrate that humanity has been here for the last 4 million years and so on. Is this earth going to be there 4 million years from today? And if it is there, how is it going to look like? And how will they talk about the people in 2023? Their contribution to the sustainability of the world.
Yeah.
Humanity, through education, through the different platforms we get like this one and others, we have to really encourage our fellow human beings to think about, I know we love comfort, I know it is good to sit right and dress well and do on, but if there is something we must focus about more is the sustainability of life. Yes, today fish is dying because of pollution in the water. Excuse me. Tomorrow it is going to be you dying because the air is toxic, because the water you drank was toxic. I saw a story where they said water, I think about 80% of water in Kasese district is sort of toxic and so on. The more you take that, your children take it, before you know it, humanity will be phasing out.
Just like the biodiversity, the animals are dying right now.
Yes.
It's soon coming to us.
So it's soon coming to us.
Extinction.
And the sooner we realize that it is about protecting us and how we continue the lineage of the lineage of humanity, the better it is for us. And yeah.
All right, so thank you very much. We have reached the first half of the show. We shall just briefly go for a short break. And right after the break, we're going to talk about the role of young people in ensuring that there is sustainable development, what we can do, how we can help each other, and how we can educate each other about these things, so that we can see that we have a sustainable future and a sustainable world. Stay with us as we go for a short break. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you for staying with us. Welcome back from that short break. Right before we went into the break, we were discussing International Youth Day and its significance, but later on we looked at environmental challenges and green skills. Right about now, I want us to look into the role of youth in environmental conservation. I think that's a conversation that tonight's topic shouldn't see us leaving it without actually dissecting it. So I'll start with you, Roy, the role of youth. Don't worry. The role of youth, as you realize the pattern.
The senior, you know.
So discussing the role of youth in environmental conservation. Right now, my question to you is, what role can young people play in raising awareness about environmental issues in their communities?
Well, I began with, it is dismissive to say what can the youth do, because they're already doing a great job in line with that. When you look at the game rangers who are managing our game parks and game reserves from encroachment, and those are young people really who are doing really well. The youth, first of all, are very innovative. I know of a young man called Sinan, is a friend, and we're discussing on how to manage plastics. So he says he has an organization and they are collecting over 4 tons of plastic per month and recycling it into building blocks.
Interesting.
So in future, we shall be building houses using plastics. But then on the ground, we can have something else as a foundation, something firm for a foundation, and then build with.
Yes, that's being very innovative.
But then the intention is to reduce single-use plastic to single-use plastic. That kind of recycling, that you recycle a water bottle into a soda bottle. Okay? If we do not have perfect ways to manage any single bottle jumping out of that chain into the ocean, into the soil, we shall lose it at the end of the day. And we do not have that system where no single bottle will jump out of the chain. So the intention is to stop the use of single-use plastics, but also gathering what is already in the oceans, what is already in the lakes, and using them for something more sustainable, for something that can be used for longer. And other young people also being very innovative about alternative ways to solve these issues. Now, there's another group from Makerere University that is using light and electricity to test for cancer and to test for malaria cells. That means we won't need syringes to pierce, and these plastic things to put. So if we can use what is available, innovate with what is available to reduce wastage. But also, as I started with, we must change our way of life. It must not be glorious for you to go hunting so that you kill a lion and take a photo with it on Instagram for you to be considered the alpha male. Okay? Because that is the whole idea of trophy hunting, that someone goes out there, kills a rare species of an elephant to take a photo with it, and then cut off its head and put in his sitting room and say, I traveled to Zimbabwe to hunt.
Animals.
This is what I hunted. It was the only one of its kind. Caused an entire species to go extinct. That should be backward. That should be considered. It shouldn't even get a single like. That is primitive. Okay? So our way of life, it shouldn't be glorious to have 3 phones. Okay? So that you're pressing on this one and then someone is calling you on this one. And then also in your car, there is a phone screen. I mean, a huge screen on which you... all that for what? Because the more you have, the more we are destroying to create it. Find someone, a lady with very many clothes. Some are packed in cases. They don't.
Attacking it.
Some of which they never even use.
They don't even.
They don't.
They are
even
not aware
need.
that it exists.
Can I intervene on that matter?
For those clothes to be created, something had to be destroyed.
I agree though.
Some trees had to be cut, or animals had to be slaughtered, or something had to be destroyed for us to create what you're calling luxury.
And you see, most of these are poly.
You don't have to point.
Guys, I feel like okay. We move.
So I mean, gold-coated watches. What? I mean, mining is being done. Children are being exploited for all this. So what do I need to live a healthy life? What do I need to contribute to society's growth? And that is only what I will buy. And when I'm buying only what I need, the capitalist will not be creating. Because the more we need, the more they create. The more industries they build. Okay? The more pollution they make. Okay? The whole fashion industry and all the pollution that comes along with it is created along our psyche and desire for, if I put on this shirt, I shouldn't ever be seen on it again. Because some friends will think I only have one shirt. So what if they think that we want?
So are you naked?
I mean, am I naked? I mean, you get that so much is destroyed just to have us live this way, pompously, this gloriously. Very unimportant. Material dialectics. It comes from a national conscience. I mean, for a minister to move, they would need an entire convoy of 20 vehicles. They are polluting. But then that is what we consider power and glory. So until we change what we consider to be very important and very glorious, then we shall be destroying more to fulfill that insatiable. We shall not, it will never be fulfilled. So even Bill Gates will need another extra plane.
All right.
A fleet of planes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Roy raises an important issue that we need to revise the way we live our lives. Yeah, and that is this form of awareness that we need to cast outside there. That we revise how we live, the pomp, the lavish or luxurious lifestyles that make us, live in a way that leads to more hunting and more degradation of the environment. Should stop, and that is this form of awareness. But in my opinion, I think at this point in time we need to do more of more climate education as well. That is very important, especially for the younger generation. You realize that they say that our population is 48 million people, and under that 48 million people, 78 of that population are young people. But 78 of that population are people aged between 15 to 35. 77% of that population are people aged between 15 to 25, 24, 25. But now, out of that 77%, 15% of that population are people aged from 18 to 35, and the rest are children. So we as young people are charged, or as reasonable adults are charged with that responsibility to educate the young people, the people in primary schools, elementary school, to understand these concepts, because they are the next leaders after us. And I think that is an aspect that is very important. But let me get to you, my brother Philip, on the aspect of opportunities and skill development. When we talk about green skills, obviously we need to talk about opportunities and skill development. So my question to you is, what are some of the resources and opportunities available for youth to learn and develop green skills?
Thank you, Drake. Now, really, learning is no longer a challenge in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Other than the traditional way of learning, going to class and studying and lectures and so on, the technological world has created quite a bit of learning avenues, including the internet, including a series of barazas on different issues and topics across the world, but also the physical experiences we undergo as young people, but also as a people. In evolution, you cannot dwell with the new challenges that evolve, like the one we are talking about. And what happens is that as the environment evolves, people move with it. Now, as they move with it, the experiences teach them more of how they must behave, of what they must know, and what they must do to make sure they move at par with the environment. Over the past couple of months and a few years, we've seen floods in very many countries. Wildfires. We've had tsunamis. We've had countries that did not have winter getting winter, and those that had actually no longer having it. We've had near the Arctic ice is reducing by the day. We've had there is apparently a division in some of the land masses. We've had the land mass of Africa is somehow subdividing somewhere. We've had there is also a similar division in Asia somewhere. And they say it's because of the forces we are creating as humanity, the weapons that are exploding every other day, the machines that are pressing the ground, they are causing the divisions in these huge land masses. So you never know, a few years from now we might have a couple of other continents or perhaps nations, and some people sinking down into the water. And when you see all these things happening, being dumb doesn't justify the fact that you don't realize you have to change your ways. It must be something else. Maybe you are compelled or under the influence of some demon or
vampires.
Because there is no better teacher than experience. You will not know the value of eating unless you are enclosed in a space where you can't find food for 2 days and you're like, oh man, I'm dying.
Yeah.
When food is just there, you're like, they will teach you need to eat and you eat. Yes, you will get the message, but the practical bit of you being hungry teaches you more. So the practical bit of us living in a world where people are burning, we saw fires starting even in cities. Yeah. You saw in the UK.
Hawaii has literally burnt.
Yes. We saw the floods. We saw the recent earthquake in Turkey
And Syria,
and Syria.
over 50,000 people dead.
Yes, these are experiences. We are living it. Come to Uganda here. Northern Uganda, which the Karamoja bit and so on. We used to say, oh, well, it is semi-desert,
Semi-desert.
something. It is becoming a desert.
Don't even look at northern Uganda alone. Have you ever felt the heat here?
The heat we have today in Kampala, it shines and people literally want to put off their clothes. Seasons that used to be wet are now dry. And when it rains, it's floods everywhere. These are things we are living. The soils are destroyed. We are now, Uganda did not need fertilizers many years ago. Today we are crying for fertilizer. And there is no food. And a simple conflict between two very small countries in Europe, we are crying of hunger. In Uganda. Why? Because our soils are not as viable as they used to be. Our waters are polluted. Our lakes are getting depleted. Fish is dying. These are the experiences that should teach us what to do. We must realize where we are. And if we are able to ascertain that it is a crisis situation we are in, then perhaps we shall devise means of living a better way than the one we are living.
Thank you. That has been powerful, painful, but the reality. Until we realize so, because you understand that at this point in time, some people actually don't know about this. When you talk about climate change, they'll ask you, what's that? And in this 21st century, where you just at the tap of your phone, you get all the necessary information and you understand what exactly is going on. But yes, we understand internet penetration here in Uganda is still quite low and the illiteracy levels are still quite high. So I think it's charged our responsibility here to reach out to those people who do not know about these issues, to tell them about this. But as well, even in our villages, people are now understanding that the patterns have changed. We used to understand how people used to, farmers used to know that in this season, I'm planting this because rains will come back by this time. Pollination. At this point in time, can you be in position to
It's
detect so?
unpredictable.
It's unpredictable.
Right. We used to look at the birds and
And
their
you tell,
movement,
and you would know.
and you're like, it's going to rain.
But now,
Now even the birds are
They're no longer
they're no
there.
longer communicating.
they died.
we shouldn't laugh at the death of birds.
Okay, when I was growing up, you would tell that it is 3 p.m. by the sound of the bees. Like you would hear bees.
Which part of Uganda?
Which part of Uganda is
I was
that?
in Punyangavu. Yeah.
Okay.
The district you go through from Fort Portal as you go to Kasese.
I think
But
we had
you
a
would
similar thing in Masaka.
Yeah, they would hear
Yes,
bees.
bees
and you're
around
like,
that time.
it's
A swarm of bees and
another swarm and
Yes.
another swarm. You're like,
it's
it's three.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
Interesting.
now, I mean,
Bees
they are
are
not
White
there.
birds.
Okay.
The bees are not there.
Those are stories we have to tell, and that's how we need to create the climate
to
awareness.
the young people.
Let me get to you.
Wow, young people.
Let me get to you, Irene. You understand when we have these conversations of climate change, the most vulnerable people. Let me just, before even I go to the most vulnerable people, Africa at the moment is the most prone and vulnerable continent when it comes to climate risks. And realize that climate risks is determined on a number of factors. Human Development Index, apart from the Human Development Index, you look at the income of the people, among others. And Africa is at a point whereby our Human Development Index is low. Our capacity to adapt is still low. Now that makes us vulnerable. But even in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, countries like Uganda are greatly affected because of the high poverty levels. 41% of our population are poor. But to the point, the most vulnerable people,
Which is
women.
conventional.
Women are very vulnerable when it comes to these things. Let me just give you a simple example. I come from a village called Kochungao in Omoro district, now Omoro district. And realize the nearest school is it's Koch Primary School, almost 4 kilometers away from my home. And I have kids who walk in the morning to go to that school. And when I engaged with one of my aunties, and she told me these kids have to first fetch water from a place called Onerogbo, which is almost 3 kilometers
Must
in
go.
the morning. It's
Go
sad.
to school.
They
you
walk
see,
to fetch
It's
water,
sad.
bring water home, and then
And
go to school. And realize that girls are the ones who do this, the gender roles. Girls are not charged with the responsibility to fetch water. So you realize that it's very hard for the girl child to complete secondary school. And what does that mean? That they will not be in position to get formal employment. That means they will languish in the vicious cycle of poverty, inclusivity, diversity. How can we bring women, girls, persons with disabilities that we always neglect in these conversations to be part of this conversation that we're talking about?
Thank you, Drake. Since I'm the female in the house anyway.
That's why it's supposed to tell us.
But earlier on, there is, I've forgotten, is it NTV that has that program on farming? There is a time I was watching, I've watched, I think,
something
like that. And this person was using plastic bottles to plant tomatoes, and later on, that's where they would get their income from. Other people would use towels and then make plant vases. But it's very absurd that someone has to first go fetch water, then later on attend school. You realize that even when they are at school, their concentration capacity is so low, because now they are probably thinking, what are my siblings back home? Because realize there's a high birth rate in such districts. You will find that the age gap between children is like 9 months. Those were small months, 1 year. You get, now they are in class thinking, oh, when class is done, I'm going to go back, have to fetch water again, then cook and all. How do we bring this to them? First of all, we need to come to realization that there are spaces that are there right now. So now it comes to utilization. How sensitive are we to what we have now before we go out to actually create more? Are we using the spaces that are there right now, or does it come as a buzz? Then eventually, when it's done, and probably you have actually gotten what you want, that you actually leave, and you're not minding about a one person who is in a certain district that can't access all these things. The reason as to why the girl child is so vulnerable, it's because there are very many factors that influence all these things. You realize that all the way from 80 years, they have always been probably put in a box.
Excluded.
You get a woman is for the kitchen. They, at a certain age, for you must go and get married. And funny enough, and absurd at the same point, is the fact that certain areas are still experiencing this. That you will find a child being married off because the parent wants cattle, so that they can milk and feed this one. When this one comes to a certain age, dispose of. You understand? But we need to utilize the spaces that are there right now. That if UN has a refugee program, you're going to use the various avenues to actually go to those areas and sensitize people that how do you properly dispose of a plastic bottle or a plastic bag. That Roy was speaking of the fact that his friends are now building plastic blocks. Now that creates having mergers of, get in touch with these places that probably have the highest level of plastics disposed of, and use them to create renewable energy. That you're going to let them know that you're going to use probably plastic in a better way, not to destroy the globe, but to actually enhance it. So my thinking is, before we go out to create more spaces that are passionate about sustainable development for the globe, for the girl child, for the boy child as well, for anyone in the country or anyone globally, let's use the spaces we have now. because there's a lot of funding. We're not going to deny it. But although there are attachments to it and with the whole agenda that is going on now, but we need to realize that the places, the north part of Uganda has the highest rate of refugees. So you're going to use those spaces and partnerships to actually help preach about climate change. You realize that it's now also coming to the knowledge of our elders that, oh, the wettest months are now the driest months. It has become an interchangement. So now they are well aware. They may not have a name to attach to it, but now they are in the know. So the question is, we have realized, so how are we going to solve this? We need to start utilizing the spaces there. The people who are willing to fund someone to become an environmental analyst, that they will know what is perfect for a semi-desert area, what is perfect for a sub-Saharan city, what is perfect for any type of climate. And that's the only way we are going to be able to push this agenda out there for the entire generation come to enjoy, if we hold hands together and actually fight this cause. That we are facing climate change. How do we go about it? We know there are green skills. We know there are green jobs.
Okay.
Now we are going to create a green market. So we need to sit down and actually identify and then merge and grow together. Just like the way Philip said, that the problem I'm facing, it may be slightly different from someone who is in Egypt or someone in South Africa or someone in another continent, but it doesn't take away the fact that this problem exists. If Rwanda was able to do away with polythene bags, you're going to go and we sit on the same community, ESC. Ask them, how did you go about it?
But even no one has died because they are not using a polythene bag.
Sure, exactly. I was telling Phillips during the break that I was watching a movie and these guys were packaging beef in a paper bag. It was so beautiful. But now you're going to buy your beef and all throw the polythene bag wherever. So we need to borrow ideologies that if country A has ticked off a box or a certain SDG, how do I tick off this box? How do I create something better?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Philip, then I'll get back to my brother here. She has talked about women, girls, among others. For me, I want to focus on persons with disabilities, PWDs. When we have these conversations, we neglect that we have blind people who do not watch news, but possibly have the ability to hear. How can we get them involved in such conversations? How can we also get them involved to get to know about these conversations? We have people who are deaf. How best do we need to include them in these conversations and communicate with them so that they're also part of this conversation? Generally, how can we get persons with disabilities into conversations of climate change to see to it that they're also part of the decision-making process, because the decision that comes out of what we decide impacts them as well.
Thank you. There is something called inclusion. And when you read about the SDGs, they talk about not leaving anyone behind. This takes me back to the African way of managing society. The African way is generally socialistic, where the human conscience drives the decision undertaken by people. You will always hear stories of a child in a family was not only a child of that family, but the community. You will hear stories that those days people would not go hungry when the neighbor had a ripe banana in their plantation. So people lived in communities as one, which is humanity. Now, the world today has really worked so much, I don't know whether so much in front or so much irresponsibly, that there are very many groups of people. We are so much clustered in groups. Those are women, those are youth, those are disabled, those are whichever group. These did not exist. Why do we have them now? Is it very essential to refer to me because of my color or because I don't have one finger, because I don't have... I think the question should be, do we need to be having these different groups of people? After all, we are people. I don't need someone to remind me or to instruct me or to tell me that assist that old woman carry their water jerrycan when I can just see them carrying their water jerrycan. It is the human conscience that tells you, oh, take that through, because these are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our parents, they are our... We live with them by the day. The way you love your sister is the same way you love your brother who is blind, who is deaf. So we just have to relate with these people on the basis of humanity, the Ubuntu context of living in society. The more we try and emphasize these groups and underline them, then trust me, we shall not include them. We shall not.
Okay, thank you very much. You bring a very clear argument that we need to live, because the Ubuntu principle is I am because we are, togetherness. Roy, we have reached the top of the hour, but briefly, and as you give your concluding remarks, how can we get youth involved, and particularly in the decision-making process, and your concluding remarks as well?
Okay. Just to add a statement on his submission, that we have Braille. Now, more information regarding climate change is being typed in Braille so that people who are visually impaired can be able to also access it. Also more sign language to mean the various climatic catastrophes that are happening is being introduced on the syllabus for people who have hearing impairments. So so much is already being done, but still so much more can be done for inclusion to happen. Also in our African societies, we had a way to self-regulate, that these clans and settings within our African contexts were meant particularly to regulate ourselves. That's why you hear, oh no, yedirembogo. A whole big group of Baganda do not eat buffaloes and work to protect buffaloes. And therefore buffaloes are their responsibility to protect. So we have a huge group that protects. They do not eat that kind of animal. Ngavi. So the Ngavi is protected. So you find the African society was one that regulates how things are consumed, how things can live for the next generation to find. So we must underline that to our people. We must tell that to our people. Now you hear, when you muziro gwange mbachi. But we must continue telling people. Because these were self-regulating. They don't eat this kind of fish. So you don't find a whole group of them not going to the swamp to destroy it to get the mad fish. You get? So the swamp is protected, the mad fish. Should you do it, you could die.
Yes,
you could, you know, it's an abomination. You can't do that. So our society was regulating in itself. But also our society had women at the forefront. I do not agree with the notion that the women uplifting, the women emancipation is a non-African concept. Because it in our African societies, the woman was a big issue. Well, many of our kingdoms were actually being governed by women from Egypt to Mali to wherever. These were matriarchal societies in Liberia, in what. But in my conclusion, let me say this, that in the words of Julius Nyerere Mwalimu, he says that development cannot be the construction of a road. So that we say, you see, there was no road, now there is a road, so you have developed. Or it cannot be the construction of a building to say there was no skyscraper there, now there is a skyscraper, therefore you've developed. Development should mean the development of the people. The deliberate changing of the people and their way of life and their interpretation of what is meaning, what is meaningless. That is development. And we must concentrate on that kind of development. It solves so much of the issues we face in society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Powerful. Okay. Closing remarks or your parting shot?
My parting shots would be, as it should be a sole responsibility to evolve every day. We are living in a world of competition. I'm competing with Douglas. I could be better at this. Try to be a better you every day. Wake up in the morning and find something new to fall in love with, something new to protect. Just like the way my plant is a very rare plant. I've seen it once my entire time. It's a rare species. So let your goal be to to find something new to evolve in and protect, just to pass on a legacy. So those are my parting shots.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pan-Africanist. Parting shots, my brother.
Yes. I think it was Malcolm X, one of the statements he made in the year 1968. He was asking the black community who had taught them at the time to hate themselves, that they had to bleach their skin to look like the white man.
Conk their hair.
To change, yes, their hair, to change their nose and everything about them so that they could look like the white man. I want to borrow similar words to speak to humanity and ask you and I and whoever is watching this, who taught you to hate yourself so much that you do things that are leading to self-destruction. Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate humanity? And if there is no one that taught you, then that's not a trait you should undertake as a human being. Because humanity is there to be preserved, not to be extinct.
Powerful. Thank you. Thank you very much. You've heard it there from the young people. Very brilliant submissions. Personally, I just don't want to spoil the soul that has already been submitted. I'll just say thank you very much for watching, and I've been your moderator. Douglas Drake Onen is my name, and thanks to Phillip Muliisa, thanks to Irene Nakamatte, and thanks to Rugumayo for joining us today for discussing tonight's topic of significance of the International Youth Day and green skills for youth. Otherwise, stay with us, continue watching, and see you next week. Bye-bye.